He thought I was lucky to have him. He thought I didn't understand money. He thought I was emotional, soft, easy. What he didn't know, I had already started building a case before he bought the ring. And when I said I do, I already knew who he was. Before we start, if you enjoy stories about quiet revenge, calculated moves, and people who think they've won too early, make sure you like this video and subscribe, because some lessons aren't loud, they're strategic. Now let me tell you how my husband thought he married a jackpot, when in reality, he married an investigation. The first time Daniel held my hand, his thumb traced slow circles against my skin. Most women would call that romantic. I called it observational. I've spent my entire life around money. Not flashy, loud, new money theatrics. Quiet money, structured money, generational money. The kind that doesn't chase attention because it already owns the room. Men who grow up around it don't stare. Men who didn't study it. Daniel studied. At dinner with my parents, he wasn't intimidated. He wasn't overly charming either. He was precise, controlled, curious, and measured doses. My father asked casually, "So, Daniel, what's your long-term plan?" Daniel smiled easily. "Sustainable growth, strategic positioning. I don't believe in quick wins." That answer sounded polished, practiced. Later that night, when we were alone, he walked through my family's garden and said softly, "You never told me your family owns half this district." I watched his reflection in the glass door before answering, "Does that change anything?" He laughed lightly. "Of course not. I just didn't realize how established you are." Established. Not loved, not interesting, not kind. Established. Over the next few weeks, I noticed a pattern. He asked subtle questions disguised as intimacy. Do you manage your own investments? Is everything under your name? Your father still signs major decisions. He always asked with a gentle smile, as if curiosity were affection. One evening, I decided to test him. "I'm thinking about stepping back from managing the portfolio," I said casually over wine. "Maybe let someone else handle it." His eyes flickered, just slightly. "That's a big decision. You should be careful who you trust." Trust. Interesting choice of word. I said, "You sound concerned." "I just want to protect you." Protect me. I had legal teams that could dismantle companies in weeks. But I nodded, leaned into him, and whispered, "That's sweet." He kissed my forehead, and I let him believe he was leading the narrative. But that night, I wrote one sentence in my private journal. He's not falling in love, he's evaluating risk. And once you realize someone is evaluating you, you stop being the target, you start becoming the observer. By the third month, he had memorized my routines. By the fourth, he knew which accounts I actively mentioned and which ones I didn't. By the fifth, he thought I didn't notice him calculating timelines. That was the moment I made my decision. If he wanted to play long-term strategy, so would I. And unlike him, I grew up learning how these games end. The proposal happened exactly how a man like Daniel would design it. Controlled, curated, optimized. A private cliffside villa overlooking the ocean. Not the kind you book impulsively, the kind you reserve weeks in advance with deposits that require planning. White roses, not red. Safe choice, elegant, calculated. A violinist positioned far enough to feel intimate, close enough to be captured clearly on video. Because yes, there was a photographer. Just in case we want the memory, Daniel said casually when I noticed the camera bag near the bar. Just in case. I smiled. He dropped to one knee just as the sun dipped perfectly into the horizon. Golden light hit my face at the exact angle that would make the rings sparkle brightest. He knew where to stand. "From the moment I met you," he said, voice steady, "I knew you were different. Different. I don't care about your family's money. I care about you." That was the only line he rehearsed too much. His breathing didn't change. His pulse didn't spike. His pupils didn't dilate. Men in love tremble. Men performing don't. I let 2 seconds of silence pass, long enough for him to wonder. Then I smiled. Yes. The violin swelled. The photographer stepped closer. Daniel exhaled in visible relief. Relief. Not overwhelming joy. Relief like a contract had just been secured. That night, while he slept beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I wasn't replaying the proposal. I was replaying the timeline. 3 months of strategic intimacy, 2 months of financial curiosity, 1 month of sudden urgency about building a future together. It aligned too neatly. The next morning, before breakfast, I stepped onto the balcony with my phone. I didn't call my best friend. I called a forensic accountant. His name was Marcus Hale. Quiet reputation, discreet clientele, specializes in marital asset tracing and offshore reconstruction. When he answered, his voice was neutral. "This is Marcus. I need a full background financial analysis, premarital." A pause. "Do you suspect something?" "I suspect patterns," I replied. He didn't ask more questions. Professionals like him don't. Within 48 hours, I had a team discreetly mapping Daniel's corporate affiliations. Shell companies began surfacing. Layered LLCs registered under associates. 2 dissolved partnerships that ended just after previous divorces. Divorces. That word sat heavily in my inbox. 2 prior marriages, both under 3 years, both ended with settlements that seemed disproportionate to his reported income. Interesting. That evening, Daniel poured champagne and kissed my temple. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. "Just the future," I said. "Ours?" He smiled. "Yes," I replied gently. "Ours." By the end of that week, Marcus sent a preliminary summary. Unexplained liquidity spikes, offshore holding in Cyprus, transfers routed through a consulting firm that technically didn't provide consulting. Clean on the surface, layered underneath. I closed my laptop slowly. Most women would panic. I felt calm, because now I knew, and knowledge is leverage. A few nights later, Daniel brought up the prenup casually over dinner. He said, "My lawyer says it's standard procedure," he said, cutting into his steak. "Nothing complicated." I tilted my head. "You've seen it already?" He glanced, just glanced. "I trust you." Trust, again. I held his gaze and smiled warmly. "You should read it carefully." He waved his hand dismissively. "I'm not marrying you for money." I believed that. He wasn't marrying me for money, he was marrying me for access. And access requires timing. What he didn't know was that while he was planning entry, I was redesigning the structure. Before the wedding date was finalized, I quietly moved major liquid assets into layered trusts. Primary residence transferred under a holding company he couldn't directly tie to me. Voting shares restructured, control retained, visibility reduced. If he was hunting a jackpot, I had already replaced it with a locked vault. By the time invitations were sent out, Daniel believed he had secured his future, and technically, he had. Just not in the way he expected, because the wedding wasn't the beginning of my surrender, it was the beginning of documentation. The wedding was flawless. Crystal chandeliers, string quartet, guests dressed in silk, and quiet envy. Daniel played the part perfectly. Attentive husband, protective posture, hand resting lightly on my waist as if I were something precious. The cameras loved him. So did my extended family. But I wasn't watching the performance. I was watching the pauses. The way his smile dropped the second he thought no one was looking. The way he scanned the room when my father mentioned estate restructuring during his speech. He wasn't emotional. He was calculating. 3 weeks after the honeymoon, Marcus sent the full report. Subject: confirmed pattern correlation. I opened it alone in my study. Marriage number 1. Woman 12 years older, divorced after 2.5 years, settlement sealed. Post-divorce, Daniel's net worth increased 340%. Marriage number 2, tech entrepreneur, divorced at year 3, non-disclosure agreement signed. Daniel formed a new consulting firm 2 months later using private capital. There it was. Not coincidence, escalation. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. I wasn't special. I was scale. That night at dinner, I tested him again. "Have you ever been afraid of losing everything?" I asked casually. He didn't hesitate. "I don't plan on losing." Confident, predictable. I tilted my glass slightly. "Neither do I." His eyes held mine a second too long. Later that week, I met Marcus in person for the first time. Neutral office, no signage, frosted glass. "You're not surprised," he observed as he slid additional documents toward me. "I don't get surprised," I replied piercingly. He nodded once. He accelerates commitment once financial proximity increases. Then he begins subtle asset integration, joint ventures, co-signatures, advisory roles. "Control without ownership," I said. "Exactly." I tapped the folder lightly. "Has he committed anything illegal?" "Not yet," Marcus answered carefully. "He operates in gray zones, ethical manipulation, strategic marriage." That phrase lingered. Strategic marriage. When I returned home, Daniel was on the balcony speaking softly into his phone. "She's careful," he muttered, "but it's moving." He froze when he saw me. "Client," he said smoothly. I smiled. "You work so hard." "For us," he replied instantly. "For us." The next few days, he began introducing ideas. "Maybe we should streamline accounts," he suggested one morning over coffee. "It's inefficient to keep everything separated." "I prefer structure," I answered lightly. He laughed. "Structure is fine. Isolation isn't healthy in marriage." Isolation. Interesting framing. I leaned forward slightly. "Are you feeling isolated?" The question caught him off guard. "No," he said quickly. "I just want transparency." Transparency. I almost admired his word choice. That evening, I made another decision. If he was building proximity, I would give him the illusion of progress. I initiated a small joint investment, controlled exposure, monitored channels. Within 2 weeks, he proposed expanding it. Within 3, he suggested repositioning equity. Marcus flagged the movement immediately. "He's testing access," Marcus said over a secure call, "seeing how much autonomy you'll allow." "Let him," I replied calmly. Silence on the other end. "You're confident," Marcus noted. "I'm prepared." Because here's what Daniel didn't understand. Men like him rely on emotional blindness. They assume marriage equals safety, but I wasn't emotionally invested. I was strategically positioned. By month 4 of the marriage, I had documented communication, archived financial suggestions, mapped his external connections. And then Marcus uncovered something new, a recently formed shell entity, registered under a former associate from marriage number 2. Timing aligned with our honeymoon. That wasn't gray anymore. That was intent. I stared at the formation date and felt something shift. Not anger, clarity. Daniel wasn't adapting to me, he was running a template, and I had just identified the blueprint. The next move would determine everything, because once a predator feels secure, he speeds up, and when he speeds up, he makes mistakes. So I leaned back, smiled at dinner, touched his hand gently, and said the one sentence he'd been waiting to hear. "I think I'm ready to merge more." His eyes lit up. He thought he was winning, but what he didn't realize was that I had just opened the door to the trap. The shift was subtle, but it was there. After I told Daniel I was ready to merge more, he changed. Not dramatically, just enough. His shoulders relaxed around me. His tone softened, not from affection, but from certainty. Predators don't hunt when they think the prey has stopped running. They begin collecting. Within days, he scheduled a meeting with our financial advisor. Not mine, ours. "I think it's time we operate as a unified structure," he said smoothly, sliding a folder across the kitchen counter. "It's inefficient to keep compartmentalizing everything." I skimmed the proposal. Joint liquidity pool, shared authorization thresholds, cross-collateralization clauses buried mid-document. Buried. "You've thought this through," I said calmly. He smiled. "I think long-term." "Yes, you do." "I'll review it," I replied. That night, I sent the documents to Marcus. His response came an hour later. "He's accelerating." Good. Acceleration leads to friction, and friction leaves marks. Over the next few weeks, Daniel became more involved in my ventures. He offered to assist in restructuring one of my mid-size holdings, a logistics firm partially owned through layered entities. What he didn't know, I had quietly increased my voting control to 40% months ago. On paper, it looked diversified. In reality, I had visibility into every internal shift. One evening, I walked past his office and noticed his laptop open. An email draft. Subject line, phase integration timeline. He was outlining projected asset absorption over 18 months. 18. He planned this like a merger, not a marriage. I didn't confront him. I took a photo and closed the door softly. 2 days later, Marcus called. He moved funds. How much? Not large, testing volume, routed through a consultancy tied to his former associate. The same associate from marriage number 2. There it was, the blueprint unfolding. I decided to tighten the net. At dinner that night, I leaned across the table and touched his hand. "I've been thinking," I said gently. "Maybe we should give you more operational control in the logistics branch." He looked surprised, then pleased. "You trust me with that?" "I married you," I replied softly. That line landed exactly how I intended. Trust disarms faster than suspicion. Within a week, he initiated internal reallocations, subtle shifts, consulting fees, advisory retainers, small enough to avoid alarms. Except there were alarms. He just couldn't hear them because they reported to me. 3 weeks later, Marcus sent a message marked urgent. We met in person. "He made a mistake," Marcus said, placing printed transaction records on the table. Daniel had transferred funds from the logistics entity into the shell company, but miscalculated ownership layering. The transaction technically passed through a structure, where I retained controlling stake, which meant he had just committed internal financial misconduct inside a company I legally controlled. Documented, time-stamped, traceable. Not gray, illegal. I felt no rush of anger, no surge of triumph, just stillness. "Is it airtight?" I asked. Marcus nodded once. "Yes, if you proceed, yes." Proceed. Interesting word. When I got home, Daniel was pouring wine. "You look serious," he said lightly. "Just tired." He walked over and kissed my temple. "Don't worry," he murmured. "Soon everything will be simpler." Simpler. I looked at him, really looked at him, at the confidence, at the quiet greed disguised as ambition. "Daniel," I asked softly, "have you ever underestimated someone?" He smiled. "Not when it matters." I almost admired that answer. Almost. That night, while he slept, I prepared 2 envelopes, one for him, one for my attorney. Because here's what men like Daniel never account for. They believe control is possession. They believe charm is camouflage. They believe marriage is leverage. But leverage only works when the other person doesn't see the fulcrum. And I had been watching it from the beginning. He thought he was integrating assets. In reality, he was documenting his own collapse. And the final move wouldn't be emotional. It would be procedural. I chose the same villa where he proposed. Full circle. If a story begins somewhere meaningful, it should end there too. Daniel didn't suspect anything. He thought it was sentimental. "Anniversary rehearsal?" he joked as the driver pulled away. "Something like that," I replied. The ocean looked identical to that night. Calm, gold, beautiful. Just like his performance had been. We sat at the same table, same angle facing the horizon, same wine label. Consistency is comforting. For him. Halfway through dinner, he reached for my hand. "You've been distant lately," he said softly. "I've been observant," I corrected gently. He smiled, not understanding. When dessert arrived, I placed my napkin neatly beside my plate. Then I slid a leather folder across the table. His expression shifted slightly. "What's this?" "Closure," I said. He opened it. At first, confusion, then recognition. Transaction logs, transaction trails, shell registrations, highlighted timestamps. His jaw tightened. "You went through my accounts?" I shook my head calmly. "You moved money through a company I control." Silence. Waves in the distance. The violinist wasn't here this time. No music to soften it. "You're misunderstanding," he said, voice lower now, controlled. "It was strategic positioning." "For what?" I asked evenly. "Our future." I tilted my head slightly. Our future required siphoning internal funds? His fingers pressed into the paper. It wasn't siphoning, it was unauthorized redirection. He leaned back, and for the first time since I met him, he looked unsettled. "You set me up," he said quietly. "No," I replied. "You followed your pattern." That landed, harder than shouting ever could. I slid the second envelope toward him. He didn't touch it immediately. "What is it?" "Divorce papers." A pause. "And a formal notice from legal counsel regarding financial misconduct." His eyes snapped up. "You're pressing charges?" "I'm protecting my structure," He laughed once, sharp, defensive. You think anyone's going to believe you didn't know. I held his gaze. I documented everything. Another silence. This one heavier. He stared at me like he was recalculating the math in real time. You were never in love with me, he said finally. I almost smiled. Were you? That ended it. No yelling, no dramatic outburst, just truth sitting between us like a third guest at the table. He tried one last tactic. His voice softened. We can fix this. I'll undo the transfers. We'll reset. Reset? Like this was a software glitch. Daniel, I said quietly, you chose me because you thought I was the largest opportunity you'd ever access. He didn't respond. You studied my assets, my family, my exposure. I leaned forward slightly, but you never studied me. That's when it hit him. Not anger, not fear, understanding. You knew, he whispered. Before you proposed? I nodded once. And you still married me? Yes. Why? Because this was never about emotion. It was about completion. Because men like you only stop when someone closes the account permanently. His shoulders dropped. The confidence was gone now. No more polished charm, no more strategic smile. Just a man who realized he had walked into his own audit. I thought you were my jackpot, he muttered bitterly. I stood slowly. You were never hunting money, I said calmly. You were hunting leverage. I placed my ring on the table between us. And I was never the jackpot. I let a small, controlled pause settle before finishing. I was the investigation. Then I walked away. No tears, no scene, just documentation already in motion. By the end of the month, his consulting firm dissolved. 2 pending lawsuits surfaced from prior clients. Funny how pressure reveals cracks. I didn't ruin him. I simply removed the illusion of access. And without access, men like Daniel have nothing. People think revenge is explosive. It isn't. It's structured. It's patient. It's letting someone believe they've won until the numbers close. He thought he married a jackpot. What he married was an audit trail. And audits don't argue. They conclude. I didn't lose $1. He lost his reputation, his career, and the illusion that I was ever his opportunity. Because I was never the prize. I was the audit.